After 30 years of having wanted to read Jurassic Park, I finally got around to it. Now, some of you may be wondering why a guy who goes by Baka-Raptor would have taken so long to read Jurassic Park. Others may be wondering why a guy who says he hates reading would go out of his way to read a 400-page book. Well, I still do hate reading, just to put that into perspective. And by the way, when I say I hate reading, I'm specifically referring to novels not of Japanese origin. The last one I read was in 2010, 14 years ago, and that book was How Opal Meta Got Kissed, Got Wild, and Got a Life. Didn't expect to like it, and I did not in fact like it. I just read it because of the whole plagiarism scandal. Then 2 years before that, I read The Catcher in the Rye. Once again, that's a book that I didn't expect to like, and I did not like, but I read it to take part in an anime blog discussion. And then finally in 2005, I read an abridged version of The Count of Monte Cristo because I liked the Gankutsuo anime. And those three books are all the novels not of Japanese origin that I had read in my whole adult life until just this past month when I read Jurassic Park. Now that statement has quite a few qualifiers, so let me tell you exactly what I mean. When I say read, I'm referring to what we typically think of as reading, as opposed to, for example, listening to audiobooks, which I do with some frequency. Also, I'm talking about novels specifically. Those are the kinds of books that high school English classes made me hate reading more than anything else. So I still do read once in a while nonfiction books like biographies, self-improvements, finance, humor, that kind of thing. But specifically novels, it brings back a lot of high school trauma. And also when I say not of Japanese origin, yes, I do read Japanese novels once in a while, such as light novels, visual novels, and sometimes even proper novels. Sometimes they're translated into English, sometimes I read them in Japanese, but I still do read those with some frequency, actually more than you would expect. But yeah, novels not of Japanese origin, I've read three in my adult life until now, so I clearly don't like reading, but I always saw reading Jurassic Park as kind of an inevitability, and a perfect storm of all kinds of factors came together over the past month that got me to finally read the book now. So now let's go back to 1993 and talk about how I first got interested in this book. Obviously, the movie. Jurassic Park comes out in 1993. I'm in third grade at the time. I see it in theaters, and it is the greatest movie I had ever seen in my life up to that point. At this point, I would say it's probably still somewhere in my top 10, though not number one, although I don't really keep track of these things anymore. And yeah, I figured I would always read the book someday. I knew that it was based off a book, but at third grade, that book was way beyond my reading level. Then moving forward 2 years, 1995, this is when The Lost World comes out, the novel sequel to Jurassic Park. I heard that there was going to be a movie based on the book, but that wouldn't come out until 1997. So, now that I'm in fifth grade, I decided to take on the challenge of actually reading the novel, and I read the whole thing to completion. I am sure that there are things that I didn't understand or things that may have gone over my head, but I was able to read the whole thing from start to finish without really struggling much. And I was pretty proud of the accomplishment. I liked the book, though not as much as the Jurassic Park movie. And I thought, well, maybe I should go back and read the Jurassic Park novel someday. But I'll give myself a little bit of a break, maybe get back to it when my reading level is even higher. It's kind of shocking looking back on that because at fifth grade, I'm reading a book intended for an adult audience that's 400 to 500 pages long. And only 5 years later, I'm in 10th grade. I hate reading so much because of my high school English classes that in the middle of 10th grade, I just stopped reading all my assigned books. Well, I thought maybe Jurassic Park may be the book that gets me on track, but we'll get to that later. Other reasons I wanted to read Jurassic Park. I'm a big fan of The Simpsons, and Apu has a hilarious scene when he's discussing the Jurassic Park book. I'm not going to play it here because I don't want to deal with any copyright issues, but if you go on YouTube, you should be able to find it easily enough. Just type in Billy and the Clonosaurus, or simply Apu Jurassic Park. You should be able to find that classic scene really easily, and that scene is once again proof that Apu is a brilliant character. Don't let any of the race baiters try to convince you otherwise. Another reason I wanted to read Jurassic Park specifically is because I knew that it was available in Japanese libraries. A few years ago in a different town, I saw it in the local library there, and I figured that in my current town, I would be able to somehow get a hold of it through the interlibrary loan system. Ironically, it was not available on audiobook through my American library, which I often download audiobooks from. I guess the reason they would do that is because perhaps it was on audiobook in CD format, so they didn't get the digital format, but it still is kind of shocking that they didn't have it in English in audiobook format. For some reason, I think they had it in German, but not English, but whatever. I also tried reading the book in Japanese, and I got a whole 2 pages into it. I went to my local library, of course, to check if they had Jurassic Park or not. They didn't have it in English, but they did have it in Japanese. I took a look at the book, and it was surprisingly thin, so I thought maybe if I pushed myself, I would be able to get through it. Plus, because I'm studying Japanese right now, I almost feel a little bit bad if I do read something in English because I think this could be an opportunity to study Japanese if there is a Japanese version available. So I looked, so I opened that book, the Jurassic Park book, looked at the very first sentence, and there was a phrase that I did not understand. The first book in English, the first sentence of the book in English is something along the lines of, in the latter half of the 20th century, or something like that. In the Japanese version, they changed that to a quarter century for some reason, and they used a phrase for a quarter of the century that I had never seen before. And I figured, if this is what the whole book is going to be like, I may as well just read it in English. Also, another thing that came up, 2 months ago, I went to a funeral of the principal of a school that I used to teach at several years ago. And at this funeral, they were giving out bookmarks. This is one kind of Japanese bookmark that they often have. And I figured, shit, if I got one of these bookmarks at this guy's funeral, a guy who I actually legitimately respected, I gotta read a book, right? And finally, because I was going on vacation last month, I thought this is a good chance for me to get some reading done. I was going to take the bullet train. It would be 3 hours one way, 3 hours back. I would also have a bus ride doing some to Iwate just for some tourism. Bus ride 2 hours one way, 2 hours back. And also that's in the countryside, so who knows how good cell phone reception is going to be. So I figured, okay, this is my chance to get some reading done. All those factors come together. I got to read this book now. I mean, someone literally had to die to make me read a book. That's just the state I'm in right now, so. I completed the book a lot faster than I expected. So the original loan period was for 2 weeks. I finished it within the original 2-week loan period, and I read it for 5 days out of those total 14 days. Like I said, it's a 400-page long book. Here's how I broke down my reading of it. First day, I read 30 pages just to make sure I made some headway, because if I waited too long and procrastinated too much, it would be easy to just give up and not read it at all. So I wanted to make sure I at least started it. 30 pages day one. A few days later, I read up to page 100, so 70 more pages. And at that point, I figured, okay, I'm already this far in. There's no doubt in my mind that I'm actually going to finish it. Third day, when I went on my first trip on the train, I read 50 more pages. Second day, I read 70 pages, and then I read the entire last 180 or so pages of the book on my trip back. So I'm pretty happy with myself. That speed, that pace, it's probably on par with how I would have read the book before I started to hate reading. Now my thoughts on the book. So first, comparing it to the movie. About 70% of the book is in common with the movie, which is actually a bit more than I expected. If you compare that to The Lost World, for example, maybe 10-20% was in common. If you saw the movie, you would not actually recognize that it was based off that novel. It was that different. But with Jurassic Park, it's basically the same for the first half until the dinosaurs get out. And then after the dinosaurs get out, it's recognizably different. Like, different things will happen in different orders, maybe certain things will happen to different characters, maybe certain scenes will be a little bit different, but you can still tell it's very much the same book. And only at the very end does it actually give you something completely different than what the movie gave you. And of course, okay, I'm biased from having seen the movie so many times. I've seen it probably at least a dozen times since I was in 3rd grade, right? So sometimes I'm going to be talking about things from the perspective of a movie fan and acting as if the book is somehow wrong for being different. I don't mean it to come off that way, but once again, I'm just recognizing my biases here. So first of all, some of the major changes I want to talk about, aside from the plot, which I already did. John Hammond, the character. In the movie, he's a nice old man who just wants to make the children of the world happy by bringing dinosaurs back to life. In the book, he's not that quite clean cut. He's presented as more eccentric, senile, someone who's kind of intentionally ignoring a lot of the safety hazards of opening a park like this. And I'm actually fine with that. I think the book version of him and the movie version, even though I like the movie version better, I think the book version is still all right. Although there is one specific part of the book that I did not like when they were characterizing him, and that is one specific paragraph when he was talking about how he was kind of doing it for the money. I thought that was completely unnecessary and to some extent broke his character. He's someone he's already really, really old. He's rich. He doesn't need the money. What he wants is power. He wants power over nature. That's one of the central themes of the book. I thought that's where they should have left it. There was no need to drag money into it. Another character who is quite a bit different from the movie, Lex. So that is the female, the granddaughter of John Hammond. In the movie, there were two kids, right? There was Tim and there was Lex. Lex was the older girl, Tim was the younger boy. In the book, the ages are reversed. So the boy is older and the girl is younger. And the girl, Lex, in the book is absolutely insufferable. This is becoming a real pet peeve of mine. Authors who are otherwise really good, who just for some reason cannot write children competently. You'd have scenes where Tim was saying, "Shh, Lex, we gotta be quiet, otherwise the velociraptors are gonna find us." And Lex will say "But I want ice cream." That dumb fucking bitch. I was rooting for the velociraptors. Go ahead and kill that girl. But anyway, otherwise the characters were largely the same as in the movie. Some of the characters were sort of combined into other characters in the movie. So, for example, there's the lawyer in the movie. In the book, he's basically two different characters, but once again, it's recognizable that he's those two characters put together, and it's not all that different. Favorite character, I would say Ian Malcolm. He was good in the movie, but in the book, he's kind of the foil to John Hammond. He has a lot of interesting rants about his chaos theory, and yeah, that constant tension between him and Hammond's, it's a lot of what drives the book outside of course, the action with the dinosaurs. Like I said, there are several recognizable variations in the book. For example, there is a kitchen scene in the movie and the book, but things play out a bit different. Characters were combined or separated in the movies versus the novel. Different characters died. Okay, so this is something that I knew from having read The Lost World back in 5th grade. And I don't remember, honestly, all that much from having read it so long ago, but yeah, one of my first reactions when reading the book was, did not know that character died, did not know that character was still alive. So there are a few changes there. It's not all that surprising or doesn't honestly change all that much with the plot, but there are some different survivors and different deaths. Okay, Michael Crichton, the author, my impressions of him. He's really good with sci-fi. I thought writing style, yeah, he's not quite at the level of some of the authors that we're forced to read in high school, and I like that because it's more accessible. You don't have to feel that constant urge to analyze every sentence right after you read it. You can just go on sentence after sentence, page after page, and just flow through the book without having to stop and suffer the way you would in a high school English class. That being said, I think he is a perfectly good writer, don't get me wrong. And what I like best about him, he brings a lot of different sci-fi knowledge to the table, both breadth and depth in a variety of subjects. So of course, when you're going to write a book about dinosaurs, you're going to talk about things like paleontology, genetics, animal behavior, and you're going to do your research to make sure you can talk about those issues competently in depth. But he also brings various other scientific fields to the table and does so with surprising depth, especially given that he was doing all this research pre-internet. Like he talks about math, he also all that those chaos theory rants, medicine, chemistry, computer programming even. So clearly this guy is really, really smart. So I did a little bit of research on him afterwards. Turns out he was a Harvard medical student. So yeah, I'm not surprised at all. He has a great scientific mind, and he can write peak sci-fi. Also, finally, comparing the movie to the book, of course, there are some classic scenes and classic lines that you're going to get in the movie that you wouldn't get in the book, but still, I don't think it's that big of a deal. The book is great. The movie is great. I would say triple plus for both the movie and the book. great all around. And I mean, it's proof enough that I was able to read the whole thing in basically 5 days, even though I hate reading. Now, I'm not complaining, but I will say that the ideal situation here would be that this would be so good of a book that not only would I not hate reading it, but it would cure me of hating reading altogether. Sadly, it has not gone that far. It's still hard for me to imagine reading at the same level I did before high school, and I think it would be hard for me to read any book, quite frankly, unless I had this kind of strong pre-existing interest in it. I wouldn't be able to simply pick up a book on a recommendation and read through it easily. I wouldn't be able to pick it up for some stupid reason like, oh, I just want to check out what's up with this plagiarism scandal, or some friends want to have a discussion, let me read this book. I wouldn't be able to do that. I would need to have some natural, very strong interest in the book to be able to power through it like I did with this book. But I think now I have a little more confidence that if I am interested in a book, I probably can push myself to get through it at a reasonable pace. So that's it for Jurassic Park. Well worth the read, and now maybe I won't have to read another book for another 15 years.